Many of you know that I used to be a professor, correct? You know this, right? I used to teach 10 years at Rhodes College in Tennessee. And my most popular course over there, it was so popular that they had to give me the largest hall in the, it will always get, full of the students. It was actually called Jihad and Fundamentalism in the Modern World. That was the title of my class. So when people would ask me, what do you do? I said, I teach jihad in Tennessee. It was actually factually correct. Okay. It was my most popular course. Now, today's talk will be a little bit interesting academic, inshallah. A few weeks ago, as you all are aware, certain TikTok and YouTube videos started appearing about some New York Muslim guy running for mayor, right? Very interesting videos. Never heard of the guy's name until a few weeks ago. Soon as I saw his name, I'm like, hold on a sec. I know this name. I know this last name. And I wondered if that last name was the same name that I was familiar with. So I went to a book that was assigned reading in my class for 10 years. It's called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, America, the Cold War, and the Roots of Terror by Mahmoud Mamdani. And I'm like, this is Mamdani. I opened the page. By the way, this is my copy from 2010. You can see it, Memphis, Tennessee. I opened the book and it says, for my beloved mother and for Zohran and his friends. This is the guy running for the mayor, right? Turns out this is the guy's father. His father is a professor at Columbia. And I assigned his book for my class as one of the essential readings. So this book was so significant and seminal in the history of battling Islamophobia that I thought today, let me quickly summarize it and introduce you to the father of the guy who's running. This is not an endorsement or a critique. I'm just being academic, talking about this book and some of what we can learn about this book. It's a very interesting book, very interesting history about the book. It actually caused a bit of a, interesting back and forth when the book was released. It was first released 2004. 2004, it became not a bestseller because this is an academic book, but it became one of the most important bestsellers in the field of political Islam. And I heard of the book when I was doing my PhD, and when I started teaching, I assigned it to my undergraduate students as a part of their required reading. So what is this book about? What was the controversy about it? And what is the summary of this book? The author is, of course, Mahmoud Mamdani. He's an Indian of Gujarati origin, but raised in British Uganda. Uganda was under the British Empire, as was India. And so back then, if you were Indian, if you were Uganda, you have basically under the British Empire. So I don't know, his parents or whatever, the guy's parents, whatever, he was raised in Uganda. I don't know when his ancestors migrated there. And in 1963, when he was a young man, President Kennedy allowed maybe 15 Ugandan students to study in America, sponsored by the State Department. And so he was one of those bright students that was given the scholarship to come study in America. While he was in America, he participated in the rallies in Washington, D.C. for civil rights. He participated with MLK as a graduate student. He was even jailed. There's a famous story. He was even jailed. He called up his embassy, get me out of here. And the ambassador said, what are you doing getting involved in the internal affairs of, Americans? You're from Uganda. And he allegedly said, this is not internal affairs. This is basically human justice, whatever. So he continued studying. He finished his PhD from Harvard in 1974. He returned to his country of Uganda, where, if you know your history, the infamous dictator Idi Amin, when he became independent, he was very angry at the Indian British. He blamed the economy and the bad and the policies. He blamed them on the Indians. For good or for bad, it was what it was. So overnight, with the stroke of the pen, he said, all people of brown skin should leave. All Indians leave. Overnight, it was one of the biggest, international affairs of the mid-70s. He literally, tens of thousands, very, very tragic stories and whatnot. So he expelled them. And of course, long stories happen. So this Mahmud was expelled in that purge, if you like. He became stateless for a few years, going here and there, until finally in 1999 he got a job in Columbia University, where ironically so many riots and issues are happening with all of these protests, whatnot. He became a professor in Columbia, continued to rise, full professorial chair, the dean of the department and head of department, and he is now like an emeritus. He's the highest level of professor in Columbia. He's still in Columbia. He has not yet retired. Elderly man. He's been teaching there for 6 years now, whatever. And he's written, like he's a full professor. What do you expect? His PhD, by the way, is not in Islam. It's not in Islamic studies. It's in political science and governmental studies. So his niche, his forte is international thought, political studies, colonization, the impact of colonization, post-colonialism. That is his area. It's not Islam. 9/11 happens and he's a professor at Columbia. Now, for those of you who were here back then, that climate was such a difficult climate. If you remember, you were being challenged. You were being asked, how do you defend what happened? Nobody's defending. How do you? And there was it's black and white. As Bush said, you're either with us or against us. Anybody dares to try to make context of why 9/11 happened. And again, I have to be careful because Epic is being monitored by the far right. Every lecture I give, some nut jobs in New Jersey take my clips and they spread it out of context, as you're aware, to the governor, whatnot. So I have to be careful. For the record, and it's very clear, I have never been obviously in support of what happened. I'm a very big critic of terrorism and of 9/11. However, we have to give the context. 9/11 didn't come out of a vacuum. And when you give that context, this is not justification, this is contextualization. Now, this is at least possible to do now. Right after 9/11, nobody could dare talk about why this is happening. And the theses came out, Huntington's thesis and all of these far right. This is because Muslims are prone to evil attacks. Islam is a terrorist faith. That's it. No context, no background, what is happening. And if you dare try to mention, well, there's issues, there's politics, if you dare try to do that, automatically the assumption is you are enabling terrorism, supporting terrorism. Mamdani, in that environment, wrote this book, and it became an instant, again, bestseller is a big word, but it caused a shockwave, a ripple effect. No one before him had attempted there is no defense. He's not defending 9/11. I'm going to explain the book in a bit. And this book, look at the title, Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, America, the Cold War and the Roots of Terror. America, the Cold War and the Roots of Terror. And this book became one of the most iconic books written in this time frame, which attempted to contrast, to go against the presumption that Samuel Huntington and the far right, Bernard Lewis, and all of the Islamophobes, Fox News were saying, the simplistic analysis that the reason why they attacked us is because they are a bunch of evil cave-dwelling fanatics. Their Quran is a book of jihad, Sharia, this and that, throw some buzzwords in Arabic, and khalas, end of story. And again, it's awkward because we are not defending A'udhu Billah at all. I've never in my entire life defended. It is a terrorist attack. It should not have happened. But it did not happen because of Islam and the Quran. It happened because of politics, right? And the language used is a language of religion because these are religious folks. So he wrote this book. I'm going to summarize this book. He has, of course, 30, 40 books written. By the way, this author, Mahmoud Mamdani, he has won many awards, many recognitions. Even before this book, he was listed as one of the top 20 public intellectuals by the Foreign Policy magazine in the US and by Prospect magazine in the UK. And in 2021, he was voted by a group of academics. He was voted amongst the world's top 50 thinkers. This is the father. Amongst the world's top 50 thinkers in terms of, analysis, intellectual, academic output. So he is a well-known name in the academy. That's why when I heard the last name, my mind went, hold on a sec, I know this name. It's not a strange name to me. And that's why I pulled this book out, because it is the son of this person, Mahmoud Mamdani. Now, in a nutshell, and I do encourage all of you to, get a copy of this and peruse through. It's actually very simple to read. It's not and that's one of the point. He wrote this book for the layperson. It's not really a deep, dense PhD type of book. It's meant to be casual reading to understand. In a nutshell, very quickly, I want to summarize the book and then give my comments and then call it a day, inshallah. The book has 5 chapters. The first chapter is called Culture Talk. And he explains here the culture of simplistically analyzing 9/11 by blaming Islam. Culture talk. When you're around the dinner table, when people are conversing, you just immediately jump to the simplistic equation. Islam means violence. The Quran is jihad. 9/11 comes from a bunch of crazy people, and that's it. And he says this is simplistic and dangerous. Instead of political analysis, you are simply stereotyping. You're simply giving a false caricature, which doesn't actually analyze the problem. And he says one of the issues becomes anybody who agrees with U.S. foreign policy becomes the good Muslim, and anybody who disagrees is labeled the bad Muslim. And he says this is not the way to make the world a safer place. And he begins with his thesis, and that is, violence from within the Islamic tradition has its roots in modern political thought and not in the Quran. The reason why 9/11 happened, these terrorist organizations exist, is not because they read the Quran one day became radical. No, this is the effects of the Cold War that America itself was involved in. This is the first time somebody is attempting to prove this and push back. Remember, 2004. The situation was extremely tense. This is that book that pushed back. And he says, radical Islamic organizations, he says, are not emerging from the Quran, but from modern political grievances. And I quote from the book, I quote, when terrorists attack, we are told that their religion is the root cause. But when America bombs a country, we are told this is an unfortunate necessity that we have to do. So the same violence, in fact, our violence when it's done, American foreign policy kills more people. But violence is justified when it's done in the name of the empire. It's excused. And when it's done by other people, it is simplistically blamed upon the religion. And he says one of the problems, he goes, culture talk assumes that every culture has a tangible essence that explains the politics of a people, end quote. In other words, caricature and stereotype. Every culture has some stereotypes. Islam, violence. This is a stereotype. It's not going to solve the problems of the world. So he lays the foundation that, guys, calm down. Don't blame the culture. Analyze what's going on. Then chapters 2 and 3, I'm going to summarize. It's a very nice explanation of the 70s and 80s Cold War, especially in Afghanistan. Because again, he's trying to explain 9/11 and Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And he says that what we call Islamic terrorism must be understood in light of Cold War geopolitics. And it is emerging from US-Soviet rivalries, not from books of fiqh. It's coming from US-Soviet rivalries. And he then begins the history, which nobody had done in a simple manner, of Afghanistan. Again, we grew up in a Muslim background. We knew America was involved in Afghanistan. You have to understand the average American had no idea. You have to understand the average person living here has no clue that America is directly involved in Afghanistan. And he mentions that the Afghan Mujahideen, he goes through all of the, all this, a bunch of footnotes, everything is proven, that the CIA funded and trained and sold weapons on grants to the Afghan Mujahideen. And the Cold War was used to have a strategy to weaponize religion against the Soviet Union. Americans financed the study of religion, Muslims. That meaning Muslim madrasas, Muslim. In fact, Americans actually even published copies of the Quran and distributed them for free. They distributed them for free. They published manuals that encouraged jihad and distributed them to the Afghan people. Why? Because they utilized religion to fight who? The Soviet Union. And back then it was good to do. And they funded, and they campaigned, and they gave weapons, and they trained. They actually sent people to Afghanistan, experts in ammunition, experts in warfare, and they had training camps, which CIA agents would train the local Afghans about how to make ammunition, how to make explosive, how to fight the Soviets. Where is this coming from? Right here. our tax dollars. And the goal here was to finance explicitly jihad. He mentions the term jihad in the 80s was a positive term. The term mujahideen was a positive term. Ronald Reagan invited the Afghan mujahideen to the White House. There's a famous picture. And Ronald Reagan says, these are Afghan mujahideen. These are the equivalent of the freedom fighters of America, founding fathers of America. The term jihad and mujahid in the 80s, the CIA and America, 2 thumbs up. Excellent, let's do it, right? And so they weaponized. And according to him, the State Department funneled in the 80s, $3 billion. I guess now that's worth maybe $8, $9, $10 billion. In 1980s money, $3 billion they funded to the Afghan Mujahideen, the same core group that would eventually become Al-Qaeda. That same core group that eventually became Al-Qaeda, where did they get the money, the weapons, the training from? All of it is coming from here. And he said that America did not think long term. They didn't think 2 steps ahead. They instrumentalized religious violence for short-term gain, and they did not think about providing an infrastructure for the people of Afghanistan, safety, stability, a safe country once the Soviets had left. No, as soon as the Soviets left, khalas, they left everything and departed status quo. What's going to happen in the chaos? What's going to happen when you yourselves created that chaos? You funded people, you gave them weapons. Then when the Soviets left, you turned your back and you just left militias, mobsters, gangsters come and form from that chaos. What do you think is going to happen? And he writes, and I quote straight from his book, Radical Islam, meaning fundamentalism or jihad type of movements, was born in the Cold War. It was raised in Washington and Islamabad, not in Mecca and Medina. This fundamentalism that you're criticizing, it's raised in Washington and Islamabad, not in Mecca and Medina. And then he writes, in Afghanistan, the US chose to fight communism via their teachings of the Quran. They used the Quran for propaganda, for religious purposes, and they thought this is going to help fight communism. And he writes, we created a Frankenstein. Then when it turned against us, we ended up calling it a monster. We created, now again, we now know this for a fact. The first person to call it out and prove it with all the evidences was Mahmoud in this book. Chapter 4, Dr. Mahmoud. Chapter 4, he calls from proxy war to blowback. And in a nutshell, just a brief summary. In chapter 4, he mentions the term blowback, which is again common now. The CIA itself coined this term blowback. Blowback means we created circumstances that harmed us in the long run by their blowback. This is blowback on us. We didn't intend for this to happen, but it was predictable. We didn't think it through, even though we did not intend it. And he says that the groups like Al-Qaeda are a consequence of our own strategies in the country, state-sponsored, stateless violence, when the people that you have abandoned, they have no option but to fight back. And this term is called blowback. And he says that, and I quote here, blowback is the name we have given to the violence of, listen to this, yesterday's allies who have become today's enemies. Yesterday they were allies. Today they are enemies. The same fighters who were trained to kill in the name of freedom were later hunted as terrorists. Not because they changed, but because the enemy changed. It's the same people. You trained them, you gave them the money, you gave them the weapons, but when they did their job, you abandoned them and the peoples. You abandoned the whole country. Then they continued their ideology, but now they became from good Muslim to bad Muslim because you and your geopolitical analysis, shifted who the enemy is. And then his final chapter, chapter 5, he addresses the question that, is violence inherently associated with Islam, or is it a consequence of political history? And of course, because he's proven this, he now says, and I quote, the roots of contemporary terrorism lie not in Islam as a religion, but in politics. The roots of contemporary terrorism are not coming from Islam. They're coming from politics, specifically the legacy of Western colonization, Cold War intervention, and ongoing global inequalities. And then, and this is again written 20 years ago, he mentions the case of Israel and the reality of the Palestinians and the dhulm that is being done to them. And he mentions that this is a grievance that so many people have about our foreign policy in that region. And he then concludes by stating that the solution to terrorism does not lie in promoting what the West calls moderate Islam, what the West calls good Muslims. And who are the good Muslims? Muslims who obey the foreign policy of the West. Muslims who cheer the genocide in Gaza according to the State Department. These are the good Muslims. It goes, no. The solution to terrorism is shifting from a military approach to a political one, acknowledging our history in the region, engaging with the grievances, and supporting the stable economies of the very countries that we have interfered and intervened in. If we don't support political stability, what else is going to happen except militias and gangs are going to come and then give us that blowback? And he says, as long as the West continues to explain its violence as strategic necessity and Muslim violence as cultural pathology, the cycle of misunderstanding will persist. As long as you justify what you're doing, we have to bomb Iran, we have to bomb this, we have to bomb that, and whatever they do, because those guys are crazed radicals, he says there's never going to be a solution. The cycle of violence will continue. And I quote here, if terrorism is a modern response, it's not medieval, it's not from the Quran, it's a modern response to modern forms of power and inequality, then our response must also be modern and not medieval. We cannot go back and bomb them to smithereens as if that's going to solve the problems. And the summary, therefore, is that we cannot demarcate good and bad Muslim based upon their agreeing with our policies. We cannot simplistically blame Islam for terrorism, for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. On the contrary, we have to be mature enough to understand these groups are coming because of political realities. They are modern, they're not ancient. They are absolutely tapping into post-Cold War sentiments, to post-colonialism, to the reactions to our own engagements. And unless we understand this, we will continue to perpetuate the cycle of violence. And in fact, he wrote this book when there was no ISIS. And Al-Qaeda was eliminated. And for a while, America cheered. But from the embers of Al-Qaeda, an even more radical group came, and that is ISIS. You cannot destroy people simply by bombing them to smithereens and then expecting them not to retaliate. And this book, when it was released, it was, of course, it caused a big hue and cry amongst the academics. For those who are aware, the left-wingers, obviously, the most famous icon and dawn of post-colonialist studies, Edward Said, the author of Orientalism. I gave a khatira some years ago about Orientalism. You can listen to it. It is the iconic, defining book written back in the 70s. Edward Said was still alive. I think it was his last year when he read this book, and he highly praised it. And the other great academic of our times in this regard, Talal Asad. Talal Asad also praised the book. Also Judith Butler, the famous, everybody who's in academia knows these names. So these authors were very praising of the book. Some of their endorsements are on the book as well. And then obviously Samuel Huntington and the other side, they did not like this book at all, and they severely critiqued it. And they said this guy's just blaming us in America, and this is a self-hater, whatever, etc. My point being, to conclude here, and this is an awkward topic. This is the reality. Listen, us practicing, observing Muslims, I'm speaking in a masjid here, and this gives me a lot of blowback as well. Us observant Muslims, we are, mashallah, praying 5 times a day. We are listening to Quran and Seerah. We're immersed in a beautiful, beautiful environment of purity. We cannot, many of us, come to terms with the reality that within our circles, we cannot accomplish what somebody like this can accomplish. This person's coming from a relatively secular background. I don't know his personal life, but as far as I'm aware, he's, and also he's not from a Sunni background as well. He's from an Ithna Ashari background, right? And he's an academic through and through, but he identifies as a Muslim. Without a doubt, when you read the book, you clearly sense that he is hurt that his religion is being maligned, that he wants to defend Islam. Us religious folks in this beautiful bubble, when we meet people like this and his son, it throws a spanner in our worldview because they're not operating from our pure paradigm. They will say and do things. I'm sure his lifestyle and who he's married to and etc. And the son is also, there is no defense. They're not Molanas, they're not Imams. They're not from even our strand of Islam. So it becomes very awkward for us religious folks who are not accustomed to dealing with people who are not on our wavelength, but they're still benefiting the ummah in different ways. What do we do with them? And for too often, for too long, for the last 25 years, even pre-9/11, our attitude has been literally, you're with us or against us, the simplistic binary. You either look like us, talk like us, dress like us, believe like us, pray like us, or else we will cancel you and there's no good in you. And I have never been of this view, at least for the last 15 years, and especially for the last few years that I've been publicly engaged in whatnot. And because of Gaza and because of the realities, I have become more bold. It's given me a lot of pushback. If you're aware of what's going on, even online and whatnot, it's not that simplistic. When I quote this book and I bring it to the masjid, do you think I'm endorsing everything that this man has ever said or done? Do you think that I know his lifestyle? You're going to, I don't know. I never met him. You're going to say, oh, look, he did this one day. He did that one day. Do you think that my bringing this book and summarizing it, and you all agree with this book, I guarantee you, every one of you read this book, you will agree with it by and large, 99% of it. Do you think me quoting this book means this guy is an angel walking on earth? Or does he have a role to play and nobody did what he did? And it was a brave act that he did as a professor to write this book and the pushback that he got and to call out the hypocrisy of America in 2004. Nobody did it before him, as far as I'm aware. And nobody did as simply and as beautifully as he did it. Do you not understand that even if he's not of our maslak, our madhab, our background, even if I'm just saying, I don't know if he prays or not, even if he doesn't pray 5 times a day, even if he has a lifestyle or whatever, do you not understand we can benefit from this book? Do you understand this point? If you understand this point, begin to extrapolate more. Now, his son is running now. This is the background, the environment, his own son. And the book is dedicated to his son, by the way, when his son was just a child. His son was just a little kid. And it says right here, literally, you look it up, and it says for Zohran right here. You can see it. So this is the environment this kid is coming from. And again, there's no defense of the fahisha, whatever he might be doing. This is the problem. And I will get pushback. I will get blowback from our own community when I try to raise the bar and make our community a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more academic, a little more intellectual. Wallahi, I'm not doing this for my ego. If I were worried about this, I'd be sitting here quietly. I'm doing this because I want to help our ummah in this part of the world. And I want our youngsters to be able to practice Islam. When we have a psychotic person in charge who wants to literally strip citizenship away, when we have somebody who wants to literally go against the Constitution in his hatred of brown skin, of people of other faiths and backgrounds, we have to defend ourselves with whatever weapons we have. And if this person's son is one of those halal weapons, again, I have to be careful. The far right is going to say, he used the word weapon. By weapon, I mean intellectual and legal whatnot. I'm not talking about 9/11 weapon. I have to be careful. Wallahi, how much they have taken my khutbahs and literally smeared I'm getting death threats from the far right, and I'm getting pushback and cancellations from, the youngsters of our own. This is the reality. I have to fight both battles. Anyway, Allah Mustaan. I'm not complaining. This is my career and job. I've chosen this. But the goal is not, wallahi, popularity with any of you, because this is not making me popular. The goal is I want you and I want our audience to think rationally. It's not that simplistic.
when you have somebody who is at least defending some aspects of our civilization and bringing some level of political stability and political strength, this does not mean that we have to endorse religiously everything this person says. We have to learn to separate the academics from the politicians, from the actors, from the khatibs. And each one has something to give, and no doubt the khatibs and ulama and the shuyukh, no doubt they are giving inshallah the best inshallah prophetic model. But we have to take advantage of people outside of this realm, because I guarantee you there is no alim or shaykh that could have written this book. There is no alim or shaykh that would have had the background to do this. There is no alim or shaykh that would have had the credentials. There is no alim or shaykh that was in Columbia or Harvard or Yale or Princeton that could have done it. Similarly, one of you Maulanas and me Maulanas is not running for Congress, not running for mayor. Somebody is who has some immoral, unethical issues, no question. We don't agree. But also, they're having some good. It's high time we move past this simplistic George W. Bush doctrine. You're either with us or against us. Doesn't work that way. I can understand this guy has done a good deed by this book, and I don't know about his lifestyle, may Allah forgive whatnot. I can understand his son might bring some positives and also have some negatives. When I praise the positives, this is not an endorsement of the negatives. Wallahi, it's not that complicated. But unfortunately, in our communities, we still have to battle this type of mindset. But that's the goal here, to bring these conversations to the table and to make you realize we're living in very difficult times. We ask Allah for help. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for support. And we also realize, as the Prophet said, with this I conclude, and there's a hadith of the Prophet, Inna Allah la yu'ayyu hada dina bi rajul al-fajir or bi rajul al-kafir. Both reports are there. Allah can help the religion with an evil man, even with a non-Muslim man. Allah can help the religion. When we find somebody that is helping the religion and thank them for that, it is not an endorsement of their fujur and kufr. This is the bottom line. I hope inshallah this was a benefit, and we'll continue next week with another topic. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.